Well, first of all, welcome back to the Renaissance Room. But I wanted to start this podcast off by talking about my love for academia and where it really stemmed from for me. I do think that education is very liberating, when you know who you are and, you learn new things. You know how to show up in the world, how to adapt, how to just like survive, thrive, and all of the components that kind of make up the aspect of life. But you have an understanding of who you are, and you have an understanding of like your purpose, and you know what brings you meaning and fulfillment. And it's probably one of the most beautifulest things for me growing up. I don't know what made me really gravitate towards the word of academia. I think that I was just so curious I was so curious about the world. My background was very unique. I didn't grow up in a perfect home. And so for me, it was one of those things in which I was just so curious about the things that I would see. I had a lot of exposure growing up. That's one thing I will say. I was exposed to a lot of different things, a lot of different environments. It was very aware to me that not every Black person was poor. I actually had a cousin at the time who was an entrepreneur. She was highly successful. And I had a cousin who was a woman. She was also an engineer. I had cousins who were abused. I've had like so many different things. And so for me, I was so curious about the world and people and backgrounds and all of these different things. And so I remember just like being in school and, the conversations were always like, oh, you sound like a white girl, or, oh, you're a white girl, all these different things. And I never strayed away, because for me, I knew that the people who were saying those things to me were so ignorant. Like, I just knew that very early on. And my biggest thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about today is just why Black people stray away from education, right? Why is it that we don't lean into learning more about ourselves? Why don't we learn in the classroom? Why are we just so easily distracted and we just have no desire to learn and educate ourselves? So a lot of people right now think that when it comes to the curriculum, because you're not in the school systems, right? I'm in the school system, so I'm a sub. And a lot of people think that the curriculum is geared towards all of these different things like gender studies and X, Y, and Z. And I'm here to tell you that is not the case. So you making the decision to not send your child to school going to be a bit of a challenge, because a lot of people are doing is that not only are they not raising their children, they're expecting the teacher to maintain the classroom, teach the child the curriculum in which it needs to learn. And we're also negating the fact that majority of Black men are on a third grade reading level, right? And so I think that there's a huge factor to consider here, and it's often not considered. So while being in the school systems, there are educational programs that are actually trying to be implemented. And do you know what's happening? What's actually happening is that the kids are not showing up, because guess what? They have, what is his name? Jim Kiyosaki on here telling people how college is for dummies and school is for dummies, and how they need to drop out and they need to go buy a house at 13. Okay. You have a bunch of rappers who are talking about getting money, right? You have Lil Baby's mom on here calling him a genius, right? Like a genius because he's getting money, because he's making money, because he's what makes him a genius to any stretch of the imagination? Now, I'm not here to diss Lil Baby. I feel like Lil Baby is someone who came from his background, and he had cards he was dealt, and he made the best of those cards. And I can never knock a man who's trying. Now, I'm not going to get too into the politics and all those things about the culture, but I respect the hustle, you know what I mean? So I'm definitely not here to say anything bad about it, but I just think to say that this person is a genius, and oftentimes we always associate these things with people who aren't that intelligent. Right. And so when it comes to intelligence, which is, I'm not going to go out and buy $50,000. I'm not going to spend $50,000 on jewelry, or I'm not going to go out and spend $80,000 on shoes this year because, I know that I could use this money for a greater good. I know that I can maybe learn new things. I mean, there are books that are literally banned in African American communities that cost around $5,000. I could just think of so many other things, right? I have values, and it's not necessarily in these materialistic things. But when you don't look at it like that, right, we look at this person who's buying all these materialistic things, and we associate that with the level of genius, right? And so I think the biggest thing that we have done is really sit and miseducate our children in regards to what education is and what it looks like to have a life that's substantial and life that's fulfilling and a life that's significantly rewarding because you have knowledge, right? Knowledge is power. Wisdom is key. You have understanding. And when you don't have those things, you go out and you make really bad decisions, and you're like 13 with a felony. You can't get a job. You can't work, and nobody talks about these things. I think it's because we're too busy rewarding our young boys for like finding a way in the hustle and like making a way for themselves. But I think that this is significantly detrimental, because we have to realize, like, okay, at the end of the day, yeah, he made money, he hustled, but like, how long is that going to sustain him, right? And furthermore, that just kind of further penetrates like everything that we're advocating against, in a sense. So I don't know. I think that we have to kind of really take a larger look at that and really start to look at the world of academia and just realize that it's not what people make it out to be. The classes that the high schoolers are able to take in my district are phenomenal courses. I mean, they're able to take entrepreneur classes, there are financial literacy classes, there are classes on how to start a business. And you ask these kids, like, why you don't want to take the class? And they're like, they're just so distracted. I mean, to be honest, like, it's not really, they say it's the professor, but to me, the problem is that there's just not a level of respect. I mean, do I think that there is racism involved? I mean, absolutely. But look at our kids. Like, they're literally acting in such stereotypical ways, and our parents today are praising them for it. Like, they're literally praising them for it. I remember after my generation, it was just one of those things where I just kind of realized, like, oh wow, like, kids, like, when your mom would get called, you would be shook, because you knew you were going to get home and you were going to get in trouble. And I think that this is something that's always kind of been around the Black community, because I'm not exactly sure why, but we either are abusive to our kids or we think that they're like our friends. I know this is dysfunctional, and this is not 100% everybody across the spectrum, but this is a large portion of our parenting styles. And so I think when you're so focused on being your kids' friend, right? That's kind of how that dynamic is set up. And then it's kind of to where it's like kids don't respect authority. So, there's some really good curriculum out there. A lot of like the whole homosexuality and all of these like cultural agendas are things that are actually coming in outside of the school system, right? Like, these are the conversations that the kids are having while they're in school, like, but it's not something that the classrooms are actually advocating for. And they informed me that because the kids are not showing up to school anymore, because they're not taking the classes, these programs are getting ready to get like dejected. Essentially, they're getting ready to stop funding these programs because it actually costs money. And so I was really, really taken back by that. And they say, oh, she doesn't try to make it fun. And I do think that we do have to kind of look at teaching styles in regards to institutions, but I'm just not sure if advocating that our children drop out of school is the answer, because who's going to teach them? The way the prices of living, the cost of living is rising, right? Children are literally just enamored in fear from social media, from narratives about having older people come out and tell you, oh, marriage is horrible, or oh, this is bad, or oh, that's horrible, or oh, this is what happened to me, and oh, this is this. You have all this negativity. And if you're a child, like, the whole point of being a child is to have an imagination, right? The whole point of being a child is to be able to explore the world in a way that is new and fresh and optimistic, right? And I think that we've robbed them of that with this internet access that just kind of further permeates a bunch of negativity and further dysfunction from adults who should be the role models, right? Who should to some extent be somewhat of a leader. So I think that there's a lot of miseducation here. I think that you should have basic reading and writing skills, and I don't think that high school is like the worst thing. I mean, I think we have to realize that like people who are homeschooled have just very fortunate circumstances to where they're able to do that. A lot of parents are not able to do that because they have to work. A lot of kids are in single parent households, so that's literally impossible, and they don't have the discipline to do that, to sign online to a computer and sit in front of a computer for however many hours a day, because they're a child, and that's just literally like not something that their brain can even fathom. And then, it just, I don't know, I just think it takes a unique caregiver to be able to educate, right? First of all, the caregiver has to be educated, and we know that that's not something that is also prominent. So I don't know. I just think that overall, a lot of the narratives that we have going on right now are just setting our kids up for failure. I think a lot of the things that we praise, are just, it's horrible, and honestly, at this point, I'm really holding like adults more so like accountable. Today, I was at work and someone was like, yeah, you look your age. And at first I was like, oh, well, usually people say you look older, you look younger or whatever. But in that moment, I was like, wow, that's actually really like, okay, thanks, because for me, I was really ready to put away childlike things. I think one of the things I realized, like, okay, I'm getting older, like I want to grow, I want to change. And I realized that just in today's society, so many of our leaders, so many people who are just, I'm not going to say leaders, let me say influencers, right? They don't have that. So many people in our community, like the elders in our community, those who should be role models, who should be able to pour into us and give us wisdom and such, don't have that. They never grew up. So you have people who are 40 acting 20s, and you have people who are 30 acting like they're teenagers, and it's really sad. I kind of talked about how I think a lot of the dysfunction caused a bit of arrested development in many of us. I think that it caused just a lot of emotional, I don't want to say emotional, I think that it created a lot of people, like a lot of emotional stunnedness in a lot of the people in our community, and so it's just really unfortunate. And I think that when we talk about excellence, I think it's about striving to be the best version of yourself. I think it's about becoming all that you are, right? And I think it's about looking at history in a way that catapults and inspires you. I think that we really discredit what Black people were able to do in the realm of like math and science, especially Black men and Black teachers and all of those things. And so I don't know. I am 100% here for entrepreneurship. I really am. I just had a recent experience in my employment where I was highly discriminated against and, racially profiled and just all those different things. And it was really tumultuous. But one thing I will say, giving my life to Christ and having God on my side, I'm so provided for. Like better opportunities are coming, and I'm actually still like this podcast episode by saying it's really unfortunate today because a lot of times you can't really correct a lot of people. Like you can't, speak the truth in love. And even though it may hurt, but it's like I'm coming from a loving space, if you say, why as a mother or as a father, I think we heard about the story of Lil Boosie, giving his 14-year-old son strippers, and you hear about the young mothers who are like trying to be the child's best friend and things like that. And I don't know, I just think it's very unfortunate today because it's like, I don't know, we don't make room for like correction. You can't say anything today without people being so utterly offended and making it seem like you're this perfect person. Like I think for me personally, everything that happened in my life is the reason why I do what I do. It's the reason why I'm here, and it's like I created this podcast to educate Black people. I really do feel like there's a bit of a mass agenda to kind of erase African American history entirely. I've seen so many Black young kids who just don't know who they are, and so for me, that's why I created this podcast. I didn't have a lot of role models growing up, but I did receive mentorship in a few areas of my life. I had it modeled to me in a few seasons of my life, so it was important to me to pay it forward, because had I not had somewhat of a blueprint, somewhat of a role map, I wouldn't be who I am today. And I know the pressures of staying the same. I know the pressures of being afraid to go out and even have things, right? Like I said, me choosing the world of academia, being a smart child, I was bullied for that, I was bullied for that. Like, it's just like, so I just think that we have to really get our people out of a chokehold, and we have to release ourselves from this miseducation. So I don't know. You think about your life. You think about your situation. Like when it comes to, educating your kids, I think what you can do, what I will say, because I know in the reality, not everyone has the opportunity to homeschool. I will say that I do believe that what you can do as a parent is to show up. Show up, go to the teacher-parent conferences, like participate, be a chaperone, like show up. Because one thing I know for sure, kids whose parents show up in school, kids whose parents show up for them, they are not being bullied, right? They are not falling behind in class. They are not like, those kids are being like treated as such, right? Like it's kind of like it's your baby, people are going to treat it how you treat it, so it's like, if you don't care about your kids, then maybe someone else isn't going to care about your kid. But if you care about your kid and you're showing up, then that's what it'll be. So I'll end with that podcast episode just for anyone who has kids. And like, please understand that if you are a woman, I just want to end with this because I keep saying that, but like, if you are a woman, you have to forgive yourself and love yourself for your mistakes, baby girl. Like, you have to forgive yourself, and you have to understand that you did not know. I think I talked about this in a previous podcast episode, but I need young women to know that like, this is real. Like, I've heard a lot of young men say that like, since day one, they've been taught how to break and destroy a woman, whether it was modeled, whether it's something they heard in the barbershop, like wherever. Influence is potent. And so it's like, I think that we have to just, as young women, we have to forgive ourselves for making the mistakes, like, and, create a boundary for yourself. When you go through hard things, when you go through heartbreak, like, create a boundary for yourself and realize, like, you know what, I'm not going to go that low again. I'm not going to experience what I've experienced. Like, it's only so far. It's only so much I'm going to take. You know what I mean? I know a lot of times, just as women, our love, unfortunately, when it comes to like toxic masculinity, is tested by how much we can endure. And we think that if we show up and we be strong, that, there's some type of representation there. And that's, again, miseducation. So I'll leave you guys with that. And I hope you guys have a wonderful night. And I hope this podcast was insightful, and peace.